In the heart of a chaotic, grimy downtown, a terrifying moment unfolds. 7-year-old Fair is suddenly separated from her mother in a surging crowd. Knocked down, scraped, and bullied, she finds herself alone and vulnerable. But amidst the indifference of passers-by, a glimmer of hope sparks from a rule her mother had ingrained in her. If you're lost, find someone wearing motorcycle patches. Tear-streaked and limping, Fair bravely approaches a group of intimidating gangsters. What happens next is more than just a reunion. It's an event that will forever change the face of an entire town. Before we dive into Fair's incredible journey, tell us, where are you watching from? We'd love to hear your thoughts on this setup. At the heart of the bustling, gritty downtown, a 7-year-old girl, Lily, was suddenly adrift. The usual urban symphony of honking taxis, blaring sirens, and distant shouts had swallowed her whole. One moment she was clutching her mother's hand. The next, a chaotic surge of pedestrians, hurrying to catch trains or escape the evening rush, had ripped them apart. Lily stumbled, scraped, and was nearly trampled, her small frame lost in the surging tide of anonymous faces. No one paused, no one offered a hand, but a lifeline her mother had always emphasized echoed in her mind. If you're ever lost, look for someone who carries themselves with a certain weight, someone who commands a street. Often, they're the ones who truly see. Wiping tears and dirt from her face, a small, limping figure, Lily spotted them. A group of men gathered near a darkened alley, their heavy leather jackets glinting under the streetlights, their presence undeniable. They were the kind of men mothers usually warned their children to avoid. Yet, in her mother's words, they were also the ones who might just possess a different kind of code. What happened next wouldn't just reunite a family. It would fundamentally shift the heartbeat of the entire community. Before we delve into this unlikely tale, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. The downtown streets, usually a predictable grid of concrete and commerce, were a thundering, unpredictable organism this evening. A river of people flowed between towering glass buildings and grimy storefronts, the air thick with the exhaust of idling buses and the aroma of street food. Neon signs from bars and laundromats flickered erratically, painting the wet asphalt in streaks of garish red and green. The cacophony of a distant subway train cut through the relentless bass of a nightclub's music. This was no place for innocence, no place for hesitation. But Lily Peterson was both. She was 7, barely 4 feet tall, with a bright yellow raincoat that seemed too vibrant for the muted urban palette, and braids that had come undone from their cheerful ribbons. Her light-up sneakers, once a playful novelty, were now dulled by grime and splashed with murky water. 1 second, she'd been holding her mother's hand, peering into a toy shop window. The next, the hand was gone. One misstep, one careless bump in the human torrent, and she was adrift. Lily had tried to scream her mother's name, Mommy, but her small voice was swallowed by the roar of the city. People surged past her, their faces blank, their gazes fixed ahead, seemingly blind to the small crisis unfolding at their feet. She stumbled backward, thrown off balance by a briefcase swinging into her side. Then, a sharp jostle from a delivery cyclist weaving through the crowd sent her sprawling. Her knees hit the hard, cold pavement, scraping raw. Her right palm landed in a puddle of something greasy, perhaps spilled coffee, perhaps something worse. The colorful balloon animal she'd just received clutched tightly in her left hand, burst with a sad, deflating hiss, now a limp, soggy latex mess. The impact knocked the wind out of her. She sat there for a stunned second, blinking through tears, blinking through burgeoning terror. And then, the cruelest sound, laughter. 3 teenagers, maybe 12 or 13, leaned against a graffiti-covered wall nearby, their expressions sneering. Hey, look, little baby lost her mommy. One boy sneered, nudged his friend. Another girl snickered. She even popped her balloon. What a crybaby. Lily said nothing, her throat tight, her knees throbbing, her lower lip trembling. She bit it hard, tasting blood, desperate to withhold the satisfaction of a sob. Eventually, the kids sauntered off, their laughter echoing down the alley. The crowd continued its relentless flow, oblivious. A street performer, painted silver and frozen in a pose, didn't even twitch. Nearby, a group of young professionals posed for selfies against the backdrop of a glittering skyscraper. No one saw the small girl huddled on the ground, surrounded by strangers, the city's indifferent hum, and the harsh judgment of uncaring eyes. Slowly, carefully, she pulled herself up, one leg trembling, using a grimy lamppost for support. Her knees were bleeding, her face streaked with tears and urban grit. One of her light-up sneakers had come off, lost somewhere in the crush of feet, and her sock was soaked and squished with every step. That's when it hit her, her mother's rule. Rachel Peterson was different from the other mothers at Lily's school. She wore ripped jeans instead of slacks, had a prominent, intricate tattoo of a dragon on her neck, and never dismissed Lily's fears with simple "just find it." "If you can't find a police officer or a security guard," Rachel would say in her calm, resolute voice, "look for someone who looks like they own the street, someone with deep lines on their face, someone who doesn't flinch. Look for the unconventional protectors. Lily. Sometimes they're the only ones who truly understand." Emily had repeated that advice once during a school safety drill and was promptly met with a concerned phone call home. But Rachel had her reasons forged in a tough life. Now, wobbling slightly and clutching the sad, deflated remnants of her balloon like a forgotten promise, Lily peered across the bewildering cityscape. Everything looked too immense, too fast, too bright, too loud. She felt so incredibly tiny. A slow, chilling panic crept through her chest. It wasn't the kind that made you wail. It was worse. The kind that made you feel utterly invisible, like the city could simply absorb you, and no one would ever notice. She wiped her face with the back of her sleeve, which only smeared the dirt and tears further. The soggy balloon dripped onto the pavement like melted sorrow. People still moved around her, as if she didn't exist. One woman, rushing past, brushed her shoulder and muttered, "Watch it, kid." Lily looked up, searching desperately for a landmark, a familiar storefront, a specific street sign, anything. That's when she remembered. Earlier that evening, before the city streets had become an overwhelming torrent of bodies, she and her mother had walked past a dimly lit diner called the Iron Skillet. A group of men had been gathered out front, their presence commanding, their expensive cars parked like sentinels at the curb, chrome glinting under the hazy streetlights. Most parents pulled their children closer when they passed, whispering warnings under their breath. But Rachel had done the opposite. She had offered a small, knowing nod in their direction. To Lily's surprise, one of the men had nodded back. Lily remembered him clearly. A man with shaved head, a sharp suit, and a face carved from experience. Her chest tightened again, but this time it wasn't with fear. It was with fragile, burgeoning hope. One shaky breath, then another. She turned, squinting past the flashing traffic lights and dense crowds toward the distant street corner where the diner stood. Her left sock was soaked, her knees stung, and her heart pounded, but she gritted her teeth and started moving. The path to the Iron Skillet felt like a battlefield. People bumped her shoulder without a second glance. A man spilled his coffee near her feet, swearing loudly. But Lily kept walking, her focus tunneled. Her mother had taught her something most people would never believe, and now she had to find out if it was true. Her legs ached, her wet sock making a slapping sound against the pavement with every step. Her scraped knees throbbed with each bump from the crowd. The sounds of the city blurred together, honking horns, distant sirens, the constant buzz of voices. But none of it truly reached her. Her focus was a laser beam, pointed at one memory. The man with the knowing eyes, the one who nodded at her mother like they shared a secret. The deeper she moved toward the edge of the main thoroughfare, the more the noise shifted. The bright chaos of the shopping district gave way to a darker, heavier rhythm, the muffled thump of bass from a nightclub, the clatter of dishes from behind the diner's steamy windows, the low rumble of a passing subway train. The Iron Skillet loomed just ahead, its faded neon sign flickering, casting a warm but weary glow onto the pavement. Outside the diner, a cluster of those same cars gleamed under the streetlights, sleek, black, and powerful. They looked like predators resting in the urban jungle, and for a moment, Lily almost turned back. But then she spotted them. A dozen men and women stood talking near the entrance, wearing dark coats and confident postures that marked them as different. Some had glints of gold at their necks and wrists. Others wore faces that held stories she couldn't possibly imagine. They laughed deep, rumbling laughs, voices like gravel and smoke. Lily's chest tightened. What if she was wrong? What if they weren't the same people? What if her mother's rule was just a story from long ago? She hesitated at the edge of the sidewalk, her one bare foot cold on the concrete. She looked, quite frankly, like she'd been chewed up and spit out by the city itself. And then came the final blow. A loud, cruel laugh rang out behind her. There she is. It was the same group of teenagers who had bullied her earlier. They weren't done. The tallest boy grinned cruelly. Still crying for Mommy? He stepped toward her. You lost or just dumb? Panic flared in Lily's chest. She backed away until her shoulder bumped into the hard wool of an expensive overcoat. The man turned. It was him, the one with the shaved head and the eyes that missed nothing. His brow furrowed instantly when he saw her tear-streaked face, the blood on her knees, the single soggy sock. You got a problem, little one? He asked, his voice deep and rough, but not unkind. Lily opened her mouth, but only a small, terrified squeak came out. Behind her, the teenage boy stepped forward again. She's nobody, man. Just some stupid kid who got lost. The big man's head turned sharply. Is that right? He said, his voice low and even. Suddenly, the entire dynamic on the sidewalk shifted. Like a silent signal had been sent, the rest of the group straightened. Eyes narrowed. Postures changed. The laughter died. Every single person in a dark coat turned to look at the group of teenagers. One woman, tall with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor, folded her arms slowly and raised a single, questioning eyebrow. The bully hesitated, his bravado vanishing instantly. The girl beside him tugged at his arm. Let's go, she whispered urgently. Let's just go. They fled, vanishing back into the crowd like smoke. Silence returned. Lily blinked up at the man. His face had changed. The hard edges softened, the lines around his eyes creasing with concern as he crouched down to her level. This mountain of a person was making himself small for her. Hey there, he said gently. You okay? Her voice trembled. I lost my mom. The woman with the sharp eyes stepped closer, her movements graceful and quiet. What's your name, sweetheart? Lily Peterson, she whispered. My mom is Rachel. She has a dragon tattoo on her neck and dark hair. The man's eyes lit up with a flicker of recognition. Rachel Peterson, he repeated, almost to himself. Now that's a name I haven't heard in a long time. Lily looked up, confused. The woman smiled softly. And how did you end up here with us, Lily? She took a shaky breath. My mom told me, if I ever got lost and I couldn't find a police officer, to find the man who runs a block, the one everyone else seems to respect. The man blinked, then a slow, knowing smile spread across his face. Well, kid, he said, his voice now full of strange warmth. Your mom's got sharp instincts. I'm Leo. This here is Maria. You're safe with us now. Leo stood up tall again, his presence commanding the small corner of the street. He let out a sharp, piercing whistle that seemed to cut to the urban hum like a blade. Immediately, the entire group of men and women turned toward him. Missing kid situation. Leo called out, his voice carrying weight. Name's Rachel Peterson. Dark hair, dragon tattoo. This is her daughter, Lily. He gestured toward Lily. Fan out. Quietly. Without hesitation, they moved. Each person, a fluid shadow, peeled off from the group. Leo turned to Maria. You stay with her. Maria nodded, her eyes steady. Always. Lily sat down on the worn bench outside the iron skillet. Maria settling beside her, a warm and solid presence. Within seconds, the group was gone, disappearing into pedestrian flow, splitting off in pairs and small groups, their sharp eyes scanning faces, murmuring into discreet earpieces. Maria placed a hand on Lily's back, steady and reassuring. You did the right thing, she said gently. Most people wouldn't have remembered something like that. Lily swallowed, watching the last of the dark coats vanish into the evening. Maria smiled. But your mom, she's not most people. Lily, battered and exhausted, but no longer alone, felt something she hadn't felt in what seemed like hours: hope. Meanwhile, deep in a labyrinth of crowded avenues and gleaming skyscrapers, Rachel Peterson was moving like a woman possessed. She weaved through the pedestrian traffic near the financial district, her eyes frantically scanning every child, every glimpse of yellow, every possible flash of brown braids. Her voice was raw from shouting. "Lily! Lily!" No answer. Her throat burned. Her hands trembled. She had already checked every park near the office, flagged down 2 street vendors, and begged a hot dog cart owner to keep watch for a little girl in a yellow raincoat. But Lily was nowhere. Panic had bloomed into something darker, paralyzing guilt. Rachel's mind spiraled with worst-case images she fought to push down. She had been right there, just feet away, when it happened. One careless second, one lost grip, and now she rounded a corner near a busy intersection and spotted a uniform. A beat cop stood lazily beside a newsstand, chatting with a vendor. "Officer!" she shouted, hurrying toward him. "My daughter is missing." He turned with a sigh, his expression already annoyed. "Ma'am, slow down. What happened?" "She's 7, Rachel said breathlessly. "Her name's Lily. Brown hair, yellow raincoat, jeans. We got separated near the financial district maybe 40 minutes ago. I've looked everywhere. I can't find her." The officer squinted, as if not fully processing her words. "You said, Lily? Coat color?" Rachel gritted her teeth. "Yellow raincoat. She's 7, probably terrified by now." He finally reached for his radio, slowly. "We'll put out an alert, but honestly, ma'am, kids wander off all the time downtown. It's not uncommon. Most turn up near the big toy stores or the food courts." She stared at him, aghast. "You don't get it. My daughter's smart. She wouldn't just wander. She knows what to do if something goes wrong. She knows." "Sure, ma'am. We'll keep an eye out." Rachel didn't wait for the rest. She turned sharply, disgusted by the indifference, and pushed back into the surging crowd, adrenaline surging again. Then, out of the corner of her eye, movement. A large figure moved through the sea of people, like a tank cutting through fog. The expensive overcoat, the powerful stride, it hit her like a memory. The subtle glint of gold on his wrist. 2. Rachel froze. He saw her too. His sharp face broke into something almost like relief. "Rachel Peterson?" he asked. She stared. "Yes. Wait, how do you—" "Have you seen my daughter?" "She found us," he said simply, pulling out his phone as he motioned for her to follow. "She's with Maria, safe and sound. Your girl's got a head on her shoulders. Remembered exactly what you taught her." Rachel's legs almost gave out from under her. She forced herself to move, following him as he expertly parted the crowd. "You're your Leo." He gave a small, dry chuckle. "Still am. You probably don't remember me, but I remember you." Rachel blinked. Her mind jolted as if it had tripped over a long-buried thread. And suddenly, she did remember. The torrential rain, the empty road, the broken-down car on Route 95, 11 years ago. She was 3 months pregnant, bruised, shivering in a denim jacket that couldn't stop the storm. And then came the sudden appearance of luxury cars, headlights appearing like angels in the dark. They had pulled over, a dozen of them. One had worked under the hood of her car. 2 others had stood facing the road with arms crossed, and a woman, tall, confident, had sat beside her in the back seat, gently wiping blood from her temple with a sleeve. She remembered that hand squeeze, that voice. Whatever you're running from, you don't ever have to go back. "Maria," Rachel whispered, almost to herself. That was her name. Leo smiled without looking back. "Still is." As they turned the corner near the edge of the financial district, Rachel spotted them. Maria, sitting tall and calm on the bench, and next to her, Lily. The little girl leapt up the moment their eyes met. "Mommy!" she cried, launching forward. Rachel caught her mid-run, dropping to her knees and pulling her daughter close. Lily clung to her like she would never let go again. "You were right," she sobbed into her chest. "They really helped me. They were nice. And And they made the mean kids go away. And they didn't even yell. Rachel held her tighter. You remember what I told you? Lily nodded furiously. You said if I couldn't find a cop to find a man who runs a block. So I did. I found them. They came right away. Rachel looked up through her tears, locking eyes with Maria. It had been over a decade, but the woman hadn't changed much. The subtle silver now streaking her dark hair only made her seem stronger, more solid somehow. Maria stepped forward. You're the nurse, she said gently. Back then, Route 95? Pregnant, bruised? Rachel laughed through a breathless sob. And you're the woman who told me I didn't have to go back. I never forgot you. Well, Maria smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Looks like you passed that trust on to the next generation. Behind them, Officer Evans approaching the crowd, his frown still etched into his face. Ma'am, he called stiffly, is everything under control here? Rachel turned, one arm still around Lily. Everything's fine, officer. Officer Evans looked at the subtle perimeter the men in dark coats had formed around them. With them? Rachel didn't hesitate. Yes, with them. They found my daughter in under 20 minutes. They moved like a private search and rescue team. They were kind, and they didn't waste time blaming the parents. The officer shifted uncomfortably. Well, glad it worked out. He gave one last wary glance toward Leo and Maria, then turned and disappeared back into the crowd. Leo chuckled softly. Some things never change. Rachel looked around, seeing now how the group had formed a quiet, unobtrusive perimeter. They weren't just watching. They were guarding her daughter, her... Let us walk you to your car, Leo said, already gesturing to two others. It's getting late for the little one. Rachel nodded, pulling Lily closer. As they began their walk, mother and daughter surrounded by a silent circle of dark coats and polished vehicles. Curious stares followed them. Some whispered, others simply stared, but not all looks were suspicious this time. One man, standing beside a small newspaper stand, narrowed his eyes in thought. His name was Arthur Thorne, and tomorrow, everything he thought he knew about the city's unconventional protectors was about to change. Arthur Thorne watched them go, the little girl with her scraped knees and wide eyes, the mother clinging tight, and the men and women walking in perfect sync, like a silent honor guard. The image lingered in his mind all night, to the final cleanup at the Daily Grind coffee shop, through his quiet drive home, and even as he locked up and turned off the lights. Something about it clung to him. He'd run this coffee shop for 32 years, watched tourists pass through, watched the neighborhood change and change again. He'd always told his baristas to keep an eye out whenever Leo's crew rolled into town. Not because of anything they'd done here, but because of what people said they did elsewhere. Rachel Peterson had walked into his shop 100 times since moving back to the city, always with her little girl in tow. He never guessed that she'd be the type to nod to Leo, let alone teach her kid to trust him. The next morning, the Daily Grind was packed as usual. The bustling city always brought in families, street vendors, and out-of-towners looking for real coffee and a quiet place to read the paper. Rachel and Lily slipped in quietly and slid into their usual booth near the window. Lily wore a fresh outfit, a bright sundress and a denim jacket, but still walked with a tiny limp. Arthur had just poured himself a fresh cup behind the counter when the bell above the door jingled again. The shop hushed. Every fork paused midair. Leo stepped inside first, his massive frame making the doorway look too small. Behind him came Maria, then two other members of their crew, their dark coats and confident strides filling the space. They didn't say a word. They just stood for a moment, scanning the room as if unsure if they'd made a mistake even walking in. Rachel stood up and waved. Over here. That broke the silence. The group made their way to the booth, heads held high but clearly aware of every eye tracking them. Leo slid into the booth next to Lily, who immediately beamed. Morning, sweetheart, he said gruffly. We're doing great, Lily replied, proud and loud. I told my teacher everything, Rachel laughed softly. We just want to say thank you again properly. Arthur stood behind the counter, coffee pot in hand, staring. Every instinct told him to stay out of it, but that picture from last night, the girl, the circle of protectors, the stunned faces in the crowd, kept flashing in his head. He approached slowly. The group looked up, their postures tightening as if bracing for the usual disdain. But Arthur simply leaned over and filled each of their mugs with steaming coffee. "I heard what you folks did last night," he said, his voice low but firm. "Finding the little girl. Protecting her." Maria smiled slightly. "Just doing what anyone would do." Arthur shook his head. "Not anyone. Most people would have kept walking." He set the pot down on the edge of the table. "Breakfast is on the house." From a nearby table, Officer Jenkins scowled, his lips curling as he sipped his coffee. "Careful, Art," he said, loud enough for half the shop to hear. "Next thing you know, you'll have a line of black cars out front, scaring off your regulars." Arthur turned slowly. "Seemed to me these folks were better at finding a lost kid than some others I could mention." Jenkins flushed, slapped a $10 bill on the counter, and walked out without another word. A beat passed, then another, and suddenly the air shifted. A woman at the next table leaned over. "That your little girl?" she asked Rachel. "The one they found?" Rachel nodded. "My granddaughter's around that age," the woman said softly. "If she ever got lost, I pray someone like them found her." Maria turned. "Tell her to look for the quiet ones," she said with a wink. "We look out for kids." The conversation spread like warmth on a cold morning. One by one, people approached the booth, some timidly, others with genuine gratitude. A taxi driver offered to pay for their gas. A father of three shook Leo's hand. Even the young barista who had once rolled her eyes when Leo's crew entered brought over extra pastries and didn't charge for them. Over bacon and eggs, Rachel told the story, the whole story, about that night 11 years ago on Route 95, about the bruises, the rain, the car that wouldn't start, how they'd fixed her engine, given her cash for a motel, and made a human wall around her so her ex couldn't find her. "I went to nursing school after that," she said. "I work at the VA hospital now. Maybe I've treated some of your brothers without even knowing it." Leo nodded. "Wouldn't be surprised. A lot of vets ride with us." Maria added, "We're actually on the way to a charity gala next weekend, raising money for a local youth program. 50 vehicles. Raised 30 grand last year." Arthur, now standing nearby with refilled mugs, heard stories from all over the city that didn't match any headline he had ever read. By the time the plates were cleared, the mood in the daily grind had changed. The stares had softened, the tension had faded. Something quiet and real had taken its place. Understanding, maybe, or the start of it. Lily leaned her head on Leo's shoulder as he told her what each of the small, almost imperceptible pins on his lapel meant. She listened like he was reading her a fairy tale. And from the corner, Arthur watched it all, quietly rewriting every assumption he'd held for 3 decades. Because sometimes it takes one small moment to change the way a whole town sees. And change, as it turned out, had only just begun. A town transformed. 3 weeks later, the daily grind looked a little different. The old sign out front had been freshly repainted, and beneath the classic cursive, a smaller line had been added in neat, bold letters. All welcome. The parking lot had been restriped to include a few clearly marked special guest spaces, and not a single regular customer had complained. If anything, more people showed up on weekends now, drawn by something they couldn't quite name. Something warmer, more human. Rachel and Lily kept their Saturday morning ritual. Same booth, same smiles. But now, they were rarely alone. Leo often joined them. Sometimes Maria. Sometimes others from their crew who become familiar faces in town. What once drew quiet suspicion now drew nods of recognition, even the occasional wave. It wasn't just the daily grind. Either, when old Mrs. Henderson's apartment roof started leaking after a storm, it was a group of Leo's people who showed up that Saturday with ladders, tarps, and elbow grease. No one asked why, they just worked. A week after that, 6 of them volunteered to run the grill and set up tents for the elementary school fundraiser. They didn't ask for payment, just smiled and said, "Tell the kids to watch for the quiet ones." Lily now wore a small denim vest of her own. Maria had stitched it by hand. On the back, in white thread, was a single, subtle embroidery, protected by the city family. She wore it with quiet pride, especially when they walked into the daily grind, and the regulars greeted her by name. One Saturday, Lily was perched on a stool at the counter, deep in conversation with Leo about the city, how it worked, how loud it was, which corners had the best street art, when Arthur slid into the booth beside Rachel. He sipped from his mug before speaking. "Never thought I'd see the day," he said, nodding toward the scattered tables filled with Leo's crew and locals, all chatting like old friends. Used to tighten up every time those dark coats came through town. Rachel smiled. People are usually more than what they seem. Sometimes it just takes the right moment to see it. Arthur nodded slowly, like a little girl getting lost downtown. Exactly. There was a pause between them, warm and easy. "You know," Rachel said after a beat, "Lily's school is hosting Career Day next month. They're looking for guests with interesting jobs to come talk to the second graders." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "You thinking what I think you're thinking?" Rachel's smile deepened. "I think some kids might benefit from meeting the real people behind those reputations." He chuckled into his cup. Now that would be something. A month later, the second grade classroom at Metro Elementary was abuzz with chatter. Posters decorated the walls, and desks had been arranged into a semicircle. In front of them stood Leo, wearing his full, understated yet imposing attire, every subtle detail carefully explained one by one. He wasn't what the kids expected, and that was the point. One small boy raised a hand timidly. Are you bad guys?" Leo dropped to a crouch, just like he had with Lily. "We're just regular folks," he said gently. "We love the city, we navigate its streets, but more than anything, we look out for each other, especially for kids who need help. That's our most important rule." In the back of the room, Rachel watched quietly, arms folded, her heart full. Lily stood proudly beside Leo, introducing him like a VIP. "This is my friend, Leo," she said clearly. "He's got street smarts and promises, and he keeps both." Outside the school, sunlight caught on the polished cars parked at the curb. A few parents walking by did a double take. Some frowned, others smiled, a few even waved. To some, they still looked intimidating. But to one little girl with a healed scab on her knee, a denim vest on her shoulders, and a protective circle of unexpected guardians, they were something else entirely. They were angels, just not the kind with wings. And in the heart of the city, thanks to one mother's memory and one child's trust, they had finally been seen for what they really were. Family, twice over and forever. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.